Hello, everyone, and today I'm going to talk about the severe weather threat across the Tennessee Valley up through the Ohio Valley, and talk about the cold snap we'll see the start of next week here, and some possible snow. Um, it's looking very likely across the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes as well, but I'll be mainly focusing on the Ohio Valley. So. We'll start off with the severe weather threat for today, Friday, November 7th here. And we can see our general sort of marginal risk from Charleston, West Virginia, down all the way to southern Alabama and far sort of south western Georgia here. And within this marginal risk, we do have a slight risk for sort of up through central Kentucky, down through southern, south central Tennessee, southern Tennessee. So very small little slight risk, but it does have, Nashville, Bowling Green, um, other sort of high populated towns I can't think of. But it will turn, yeah, Murfreesboro, Franklin, Hendersonville. Couldn't think of them. My bad. But um, yeah, it's not a really significant threat today, but it's definitely little bit interesting. We're just gonna sort of briefly talk about it. Um, Look at our tornado risk here. We do have a 5% across sort of Nashville, Murfreesboro, and it sort of ends at the Kentucky-Tennessee line. That's kind of weird. I don't know if I've ever seen something like that, but um, the 2% risk does go into central Kentucky, and there's also another additional 2% risk across southern Alabama into sort of far southwest Georgia. Wind threat, this is going to be the main threat today across most of the area, and we do have that 15% risk where that slight risk is, and a 5% risk where the marginal is, and then hail is possible, but not as likely as damaging winds. But there's that 5% risk that does sort of stretch from Charleston, mostly in the marginal risk as well. Um, Again, here's that risk. And a lot of this is going to be a high shear, sort of low instability event. Um, Quite typical for this time of year. We'll sort of dig deeper into it slightly here in a second. Here is the sort of current surface observations here, and we can see, our mid 50 dew points streaming into central Kentucky. Our highs are, upper 60s. Here's our cold front, and we can see sort of temperatures in the mid 50s. It's a very weak cold front, I should add. It's not really, it's not going to bring a whole lot of cool air behind it. Um, but it's going to set up sort of, it is going to bring some cool air down, and it's going to sort of set up for this huge, bigger cool down for the beginning of the week. So, and I will sort of dig into that also later here, but we can see this sort of line of rain, not really any sort of convection in it, maybe a few rumbles of thunder um, across sort of central southern Kentucky, but even then, I don't think there's much going on. Across our tornado sort of risk area, we have deeper dew points, low 60s probably now starting to creep in into west central Tennessee. Temperatures are around 70 degrees right now, so we do have some decent moisture in place right now. Let's look at our satellite here, and we do see some some patchiness with the sunshine here, but we do see some clearing, which will help with the temperatures and the dew points and stability to sort of build across this region as well. Um, even some clearing up through southeastern Kentucky and western West Virginia, but not too much. Um, we look at our sort of our dew points here, and yeah, the blue here indicates sort of between 56 and 60, and we can see some nice moisture buildup, moisture evaction happening across west central Tennessee, western Tennessee, and this should sort of move, continue to move, yeah, northeastward here. This is sort of about 4 hours ahead, so this will be around 2 o'clock Central Time, roughly 3 o'clock Central Time, and yeah, we can see some nice dew points there between 60 and 64 with that convection across here. This sort of convection will build across western Tennessee, and we can see that in in these sort of future forecasts right here. So definitely a more conditional threat today, but the threat does exist nevertheless. So we're gonna look at some cape values here. Like I said, this is going to be more of a high shear, low cape event. This is our mixed layer cape here, and that 4 hour mark, around 3 p.m. Central Time. We do have, that sort of a swath of 1,000 across to the Missouri Boot Hill region and like Memphis, Tennessee, and across sort of southwestern Kentucky. That 500 contour sort of exists through central Tennessee and Kentucky as well. Not amazing mixed layer cape. You do want to see, kind of over 1,000, but it is sufficient enough to sort of support convective development. Let's look at a surface-based cape here at 4 hours ahead, and we can see, that 1,000 joules per kilogram sort of extend through western central Kentucky and through western Kentucky itself. Um, there's going to be, I think, a very sort of small area of where conditions will line up to be favorable across Tennessee for, the most favorable severe weather, including tornadoes. Um, and further up to the northeast here, we can see barely really much surface cape making its way across the sort of the tri-state region of the Huntington-Charleston region. So, um, yeah, I mean, not much instability to work with. Definitely favorable values across West Central Tennessee and far sort of southern Kentucky, but not too much to work with. I'm gonna show the 500 millibar sort of mean values here, and this is later this afternoon here. We can see this trough starting to dig as the cold front progresses, eastward. We can see the base of the trough sort of starting to dig across the Midwest and into the Ohio Valley here. So we move on to the evening, around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Um, I can see again this trough continue to dig with 50 to 60 knot winds across the Tennessee sort of valley regions, west central Tennessee. Um, so we move on through the evening a little bit here. Some stronger sort of values across the Ohio Valley. But again, sufficient, 50 to 60 knot winds in the Tennessee region. So we do have that shear, and a lot of this wind's going to be sort of, due west here. Maybe some southwest, you know, movement into the winds. But most of the winds here are going to be sort of westerly. Some southwesterly winds, but um, we'll look at our sort of 850 millibar. Look at our sort of low level jet here, and Again, we can see our sort of low pressure off above Michigan here, and we can see the trough digging down. This is this afternoon. This is around 3 or 4 o'clock here, and across sort of West Central Tennessee, we do have, the 20 to 25 knot, maybe up to 30 knot winds. Um, Pretty, not great, but good enough to sort of help that conditional threat. Um, Much higher values across the Ohio Valley. This is going to be supportive of a more damaging wind threat across the like Charleston, sort of Huntington region down through like Lexington and the coal fields, um, where we have 40 to 45 knot winds, at 850 millibar level. Um, Winds a bit more southwesterly, as this sort of these low level winds sort of move through. Um, so we don't have too much turning of the winds, but enough instability and shear to work with for that severe threat. So let's sort of look at what the radar will entail here potentially. This is going to be HRRR model, and we'll move on to about 2 p.m. Eastern time, and we can see this convection really start to build across central Kentucky and through sort of western Tennessee. And if we take a sounding sort of in this western Tennessee region here, we do see this cape building up. We have 1400 surface cape, over 1,000 mixed layer cape, 3 cape is over 100. Our storm relative helicity values are pretty good here, especially the surface to 1 kilometer. Um, we have our surface to 6 kilometer shear values over 45, so we have plenty of shear in our atmosphere here, but we don't have much turning. We can see more, southwesterly here. And by the time we get up to about 3 kilometers, it's just sort of this zonal westerly flow. But the speeds do they do increase as we go up with height, so that is going to help the threat. But we do sort of see some slight turn between the 0 and 2 kilometer, um, but nothing really too crazy here. Additionally, our lapse rates down here are the bottom left. Not impressive, but they're good. They are good enough to sort of support a marginal sort of hail risk. And additionally, this sort of um, our hail growth region here, so minus 10 Celsius to minus 30, and we follow these lines vertically. And within this area here, we do have some instability in our hail growth zone. Not too much, but um, we do have a good amount of cape, and that goes up to around the um, 11 kilometers up into the atmosphere. So, not a bad not a bad sounding out of Western Tennessee. We'll check sort of southern Kentucky here, and we can see the drop off in instability instantly. The line between the red solid line, that our temperature line, and then our air partial line, which is the white dash line here. And we don't have much instability. Our storm relative helicity values are, decent. They're pretty good. Surface to 6 kilometers is a little higher, closer to the base of that trough. 3 Cape values aren't as high. And then our lapse rates are about the same. So again, more of a damaging wind threat, especially with our hodograph here being sort of more straight. Um, and a very low hail risk. As we move on through the evening, we can see some pockets of heavier bands of rain across, the Charleston, Huntington region down through the coal fields, and there will be some pockets of sort of Strong winds, probably up to 40, 50 miles per hour, but nothing too crazy. This is around 5 p.m. Eastern time. Do a sounding at a sort of central Tennessee, sort of close to Nashville here. And by then our instability will be sort of dying down quite a bit. But we do have a bit more turning in our winds here, and more sort of almost southerly, but southwesterly, and then turning into more westerly by 3 kilometers. Or like I said, our cape is a lot more thinner here, due to mainly because of the sunlight, um, you know, exiting. One thing that stands out is our storm relative helicity values, over 200 on both the surface to 1 kilometer and surface to 3 kilometer. Very high values here. Surface to 6 kilometer has a, 54 not shear value, um, very high as well. Um, if you get a good established storm that does take advantage of the 500 to 750 joules per kilogram mixed layer cape, um, and takes advantage of this of these nice shear values, you're gonna have a quick spin up, I think, across in sort of west central Tennessee through central Tennessee, throughout the evening and sort of overnight, um, as these storms sort of move southeasterly, to the southeast, excuse me. Um, and it sort of just fizzles out after about, midnight to 1 a.m. Um, so not really an impressive, um, not really an impressive setup, um, but the potential is there. And this is our significant tornado parameter. This just sort of lets me know, lets the forecaster know where most of the ingredients sort of overlap, and where the tornado risk is greater. Doesn't necessarily mean we'll have tornadoes, but we can see pockets of around one. Anything really above 1.5 is considered, a threat. It does exist. Yeah, we do see some pockets of one across west central Tennessee and then across sort of central Tennessee by 8 p.m. here. This is around 5 p.m. Your greatest threat for any sort of, I think, tornado activity is going to be in this sort of region here, across sort of west central Tennessee into central Tennessee. If we look at our tornado risk, I'm thinking more, in this sort of general area, Nashville, into this 2% here. Um, but I think greater shear values will exist sort of later into the evening, so that 5% being extended eastward does make sense to me, eastward here. Um, as we do still have some decent STP values by 10 p.m. But I think your greater risk is going to be across through here, the Nashville region. So moving on to how far is this? It just came out. So moving on to our sort of cool blast here, and so right here we have our sort of low pressure above Michigan, providing this sort of weak cold front across the Ohio Valley and through the Mid-South. This will progress throughout the day and evening and exit out by late tonight. Another important thing, we can see sort of the cool air that it is bringing in. These height lines here. Um, we can see the blue sort of dip down further south. These blue sort of dashed lines here, are height lines. And these sort of dip down into the Great Lakes, and but kind of behind this cold front, there's this short wave that exits out of sort of the British Columbia region, moves across sort of southern Canada, then dips southward into the Dakotas and the Midwest by tomorrow morning. And it's going to bring a quick shot of sort of rain, maybe some snow across Wisconsin and Michigan, some light flurries. Um, create some cloudy conditions for Sunday morning and through Sunday. But we can see the cold air it brings behind it. It reinforces this cool air from this cold front passing through the day. It moves through, brings more of that cold air further down and through the northern plains, Midwest. And by sort of Sunday afternoon, we have this huge sort of um, dip into our height lines here, and indicating that sort of further dip into cooler temperatures across the United States. But interestingly enough, we do have this sort of right through here. We do have this sort of low pressure disturbance, sort of shortwave coming out of the Hudson Bay region of Canada. We can see, our uh, sort of closed region of interest here. As we move on throughout the day, Sunday, we can see it sort of dip down, sort of an Arctic low pressure here, and it moves across the Great Lakes into the Ohio Valley. Here it is, right here. And we can see some possible snow showers with this, across Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Illinois. And this is going to set up some nice flow off of the Great Lakes here. This is going to allow for some moisture to come off Lake Michigan and sort of exit across the Ohio valleys. So mainly all day Monday, all day Monday into Tuesday morning, we're going to see some snow showers across the Ohio Valley, and then we can see some lake effect snow bands sort of set up across the Buffalo region, Erie, Pennsylvania region, as the flow sort of changes and becomes more parallel to those lakes. But that is our cool shot of air here. And we can better see this here on the Euro height, 500 millibar height um, map here. And we can see this sort of, this is our cold front today moving through. It's going to bring that initial sort of kind of blast of cool air across the upper regions of the United States, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota. Um, but if we look out to our left here, north of Montana, we can see that sort of shortwave I was talking about coming out of the British Columbia region. And this thing is going to sort of help dig this cool air further south as it moves across the plains. There it is. And we can also see, you know, we can't see it much here, but we do see the block, some ridge blocking, some we call it the Greenland blocking, um, happen sort of in our polar regions, and it's forcing this cooler polar air to be sunk southward. And we do have the shortwave helping it sort of um, move southward as well. So we have a nice sort of polar blast for this time of year, and it's going to have sort of a shortwave associated with this sort of polar blast coming out of the Hudson Bay. We can see it right through here across central Wisconsin, and this thing is going to dig down across the Ohio Valley mid south here. I mean, very impressive height lines here, very impressive for this time of year. And this is going to provide this cool blast, and then it sort of exits out, and then we have more of a zonal sort of flow for the most part afterwards. Um, okay, this will show that sort of blocking I was talking about, the Greenland sort of high. We can see it just right here off the bat. I mean, um, impressive height lines in Greenland. The reverse of what's going on across more of southern Canada. But this sort of ridge blocking here is pushing this polar air out to the south. This is how we get our polar vortexes in the winter, um, or cool blasts in the fall and spring. And this is going to help push that sort of more um, southward, helping sort of reinforce that cold blast across the northeastern United States, eastern United States. So, interesting setup for this time of year. It's not too uncommon, but it is it could be a sign of what's to come this winter if things do sort of continue to pan out this way. Obviously, that will not be the case all winter, but we could see a few impressive cold blasts. But I um, do want to briefly go through our snow totals here. So this ends Wednesday morning, next week Wednesday morning, and yeah, we can see some, impressive impressive total. I mean, nothing too impressive, but we can see for this time of year some decent totals come out of this event. A potential for a few inches across northeastern Indiana, sort of west central Ohio. That is possible. We're gonna see our first sort of real snowfall in the Appalachian Mountains and sort of West Virginia and even the Tennessee, North Carolina border here. Some nice lake effect snow, maybe a few inches, some higher snow possible in upstate New York. But I think the odds of it getting, some a dusting or having it accumulate on some cars or some roofs is fairly high. I think it is possible. Our first sort of snow for the season across the Ohio Valley. Um, I don't think it's going to be, an immeasurable event for 98% of people. A few places might pick up, an inch or two or three in this sort of band here that the Euro has, but nothing, nothing crazy, nothing to sort of pay attention to too much. But it is very interesting. We do have this nice sort of cool blast, and I may as well show the temperatures. We can see the warm sort of air being evected into so the low pressure here across the Ohio Valley, and we can see that cold front actually pretty well right through here. Um, and again, like I said, it's not really, it doesn't have too much cool air behind it, but it is sort of helping push it further south for it to be reinforced further south later on. And we can see it, the shortwave down through here in the Dakotas by now, and it's by Sunday morning here, it really starts to bring in that cooler air across the northern plains and Midwest. And then by Monday morning, we are in the full sort of brink of it, around 25 to 35 degrees across the sort of the Ohio Valley, even some 20-degree temperatures throughout the Midwest here. So a nice cool shot here, and then I think even Monday night will be probably the coolest time out of this here, and we'll see probably some 20, 25-degree temperatures in the mountains, and then 25 to 30-degree lows for the Ohio Valley. So, like I said, impressive cool blast. But first, we got to get past this sort of marginal severe weather risks today. Definitely a damaging wind threat across the Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley down south. Um, Having some small hail wouldn't rule that out, especially across Tennessee. And then I think our greater tornado threat is going to be around Nashville, slightly west of Nashville as well, even in this, maybe even a little bit in this marginal risk, but into central Tennessee. We'll go ahead and uh, this. Yeah, I think it's going to be greatest sort of in this area here, where I'm sort of circling, and then sort of overnight it'll push through eastward through more of central Tennessee. But that's about all I have for this video. Sort of just, like I said, going over the severe threat and then this cool blast with our first sort of potential for some snowfall across the Ohio Valley. Um, but yeah, I hope everyone's doing well, and if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching.